Do we go ahead and pray? Would you like me to? So much for being ready. Do you want me to lead in prayer? Okay. Dear Lord, I thank you for the time to come together and to study your word. I pray that this time will be beneficial to everyone and that we will learn it and grow in your word and can use it for your glory. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Okay, so we are continuing our, the idea is to get into Samuel, but we're still in some preliminary discussions. So last time we talked about the judges, kind of went through in a fairly quick overview. We talked about the judges' cycle and how it kind of brings everything down. Each cycle yields each successive cycle is worse than the previous cycle. We can even lump the judges into certain categories. So the first one, Othniel, is sort of the gold standard. He's the good one. And then you have Ehud and Shamgar, who are pretty solid judges. They're good. Nothing really negative about them, but they're still not as good as Othniel. Then you have the two kind of questionable judges of Barak and Gideon, who, yes, they do what God wants them to, but it takes a lot of goading, and the results are not as ideal as we would like. And then we end up with Jephthah, who is just an abysmal judge. So that then brings us to the 12th judge. And as we talked about last time, the angel of the Lord comes and foretells the birth of this promised child. And after exchanges and a little bit of drama, the child is born, and the child is named Samson. And the boy grew, and the Lord blessed him. Then the Spirit of the Lord began to direct him in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. The impression seems to be that he was blessed with the Holy Spirit from a very young age, if not from birth. And as far as I'm aware, the only other character in the Bible who is blessed with the Holy Spirit from a very, very young age, possibly birth, is John the Baptist, which again makes another very positive connection for this child, right? So we got a miraculous birth. We have foretold by Christ himself and blessed from a very young age with the Holy Spirit. Everything about this child is very, very positive. This could be the one. This could be the Messiah that everyone's waiting for. He is Samson, the greatest of all judges. He is the one who is going to unite Israel. He is going to lead them into a new glorious age. He's going to be the new Joshua. Not quite. Yeah. He's often portrayed as very muscular, very, I don't even know how to describe him exactly, especially in artwork. The Bible doesn't actually give us too much descriptions about him other than he has very long hair. But we do know that he is exceptionally strong because the Lord empowers him with that strength. So it begins in verse 1. Samson went down to Timnah and saw a young Philistine woman there. This is the beginning of the heroic saga, right? He is to be a great leader. He is to unify Israel and bring about a new era of peace. And again, be a sort of second Joshua. And yet it begins with him hanging out with the Philistines, and he's caught, a certain young woman has caught his eye. This is an odd way to begin the story, right? We were wanting a David figure, right, to unify the armies and to inspire them, to lead them. Instead, we got someone who's not fighting, not inspiring, who's hanging around people he shouldn't, and oogling women in a fairly, like David. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help but not make that joke. So I had this map last time. This gives us kind of an idea of where we are. So the yellow circle is Bethlehem, Jerusalem. We should be somewhat familiar with that. The dark orangish kind of hook to the left is the tribe of Dan. That's where he's part of the tribe of Dan. The blue area is where he grew up. So not too far from the Bethlehem, Judah area. It says that he's over in Timnah, so that's just to the west. Again, we're kind of on the southern border of Dan. And if you're familiar enough with your Canaan geography, that's the Philistine territory, right there on the coast, kind of the southwest edge of Israel. So you can see that the Philistine territory sort of overlaps with what has become his haunting grounds, right? That's where he's going to hang out, that's where he's spending time, and he's found his woman. We have encountered the Philistines before. They've been a problem before, mostly in passing, but notably, they're the force that sort of plagued Israel during the time of Shamgar. He's the third judge. Again, one of the more positive ones. He's the foreigner that God calls, and he kind of runs out the Philistines. There's some, we don't get a whole lot, Shamgar is only mentioned for like 2 or 3 verses, but it's interesting the parallels we could make between Shamgar and Samson, but we'll just keep moving on. Most notable one being that they're both called to judge the Philistines. At least that's what we're led to believe. So in verse 2, he went back and told his father and his mother, "I have seen a young Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as a wife." This is the beginning of our, again, heroic narrative. The obvious question is, what was he doing in Timnah? What was his purpose there? And I can't help but kind of just immediately wonder, has this character ever been told no in his life? And we're going to see that he acts very often like a very spoiled child. Keep in mind, he's described as a young man. That can be anywhere from late teens to mid-20s. Let's just say he's about 20. That's a nice round number. And again, he goes to his parents and says, "Woman, get." You would think that the parents would be a little hesitant about this, which seems to be more or less the case. So his father and mother said to him, "Can't you find a young woman among your relatives or among any of our people? You know, someone from our extended family, someone from Dan, someone from Israel, literally anyone else than a Philistine." I'm not going to do an accent, but this, you can imagine a very traditional kind of Jewish mother being like, "What's wrong with the local girls?" And, sure, the local girls have unibrows and buck teeth, but they make great matzo ball soup. He goes, "Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines for a wife?" It's a fair question. And his response, he of course responds in a very articulate, very rational way, right? He has a reason, which is, Samson told his father, "Get her because I want her," right? That's a good argument, right? So his parents, being good, conservative, pious parents who don't want their kid to be corrupted, of course say no, right? "No, we don't want you marrying the wrong kind of woman. We don't want you fraternizing with the wrong kind of people." No, of course not. They go and do what he tells them to, because these are very permissive, enabling type parents. So this brings all kinds of fun conversations. I mentioned last time that I think there's a lot to imply that, especially his father, is not the brightest person. His mother seems at least mildly logical, but everything about Samson seems to imply this is a very spoiled child. Now, to be fair, they were basically told by Christ himself that he was going to be a Messiah. So, can you necessarily blame them for doting on him? But still, children at times need to be told no. And I'm going to say this from a very high pedestal, I understand, but parents bear some blame for how their kids turn out. And Samson has not turned out very well. But then we get verse 4, which is a really, really fun verse. "Now his father and mother did not know," how could they, "that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines were ruling all over Israel." So, for those of you who love the Calvinism-Arminian debate, we could simplify it to free will versus determinism. That's an oversimplification, but regardless, I introduce you to Samson, who seems to defy every rubric, every rule you could imagine. He's predestined to behave this way, and yet he is clearly acting the way he wants to. So is this an expression of his free will, or is this an expression of God's determinism? And I don't care what answer you come up with, it's probably not going to make any sense given the way that the story is presented. He just kind of defies all logical explanations. It's a fun story, but that doesn't make it any less bizarre and at times absurd. So in verse 5, Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother and came to the vineyards of Timnah. So he's gone to check out his bride and to make the proper arrangements, and both of his parents have come along to meet their potential daughter-in-law. You can imagine this was a very fun journey for them. And they're just going along with it. Anyway. So then, suddenly, a young lion came roaring out him. It is not clear if his parents were with him at the time. It could be that they've gone on ahead. It could be that he's wandered off on his own. Again, it's all in verse 5, so it could be that they're journeying together and the lion attacks them all, or, again, he could be off on his own. We don't know. Now, for most of you, you probably see the word lion, and you're thinking the lion on the top left. That's how you typically see lions. That is an African lion. That is probably, in all likelihood, not what Samson encountered. He probably encountered an Asiatic lion because they were more common in the Middle East than the Africans that appeared down in Central Africa. Right? That line of trouble very far away to be up in Israel. The lion that he encountered was probably an Iranian lion that were, as far as we can tell, hunted to extinction during the Roman period because they were dangerous and they hunted for sport and other things. But they were already, we think, going extinct by the Roman period because the inhabitants were just killing them off because they're so dangerous. Right? You're expanding your civilization, your societies, and you don't want lions just wandering into your town, right? You kill them. So that said, there are clear distinctions between the African lion and the Asiatic lion, probably more than you want to know, but we'll go over them real quickly. The African lions are larger, a little bit. They are bulkier, you can see in the pictures. The African lion has a very big, full, luxurious mane, whereas the Asiatic lions are leaner, scrawnier, they have less full manes. Also, the Asiatic lions, their mane kind of goes down their front chest, whereas the African lion doesn't really have the hairy chest like the Asians do. The lion, regardless, the lion that he met was probably about 350 pounds feral wildcat. This is a very dangerous creature. There are, so suddenly a lion came. I was looking at a commentary. I don't know if this is true, but it's what a commentary talked about and claimed that he had studied lions enough. Lions, we call them kings. We compare them to monarchs. They tend to be, one male lion to a pride who lives like a king. He's got his harem with him and makes the women do all the work. This is what lions do. The lionesses, they're the ones that hunt, they bring in the food, they raise the cubs, and the male lion just lounges around basking in the sun and just kind of minding his own business. If a young cub, a male cub, grows up and becomes a threat to the pride, to the king king often will usually kill them. If the young cub is able to, you'll kill the male, kill the father, and take his place as the new king of the pride. This is just the way that it works. Sometimes, if the young cub is lucky, I say lucky, he might escape or just run away from the herd, from the pride. Now, the thing is, though, he now has no home. He has no territory. He's exiled, right? Because if he comes back, the father will kill him. So you have a lion just kind of wandering around in exile. It's very likely that that is what Samson has encountered. He's a young lion that has been expelled from the pride, maybe because he challenged the father and lost or whatever. Another very interesting distinction between the African lions and the Asiatic lions is African lions tend to be a bit more defensive. If you wander into their territory, they'll defend it, but they don't usually go looking for a fight. The Asiatic lions will go looking for a fight. They're much more aggressive, and they'll wander off hunting for sport, looking to kill. So the idea that Samson is just wandering along and just minding his own business and he's attacked by this lion is actually not out of the realm of possibility. This is not just a completely fantastic situation. What then happens, however, is the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, took control of him, and he then tore the lion apart with his bare hands. Again, a 350-pound feral cat. This is beyond exceptional, right? The lion just pounces on him. He's completely unaware, and he manages to wrestle the lion and then kill it and tear it apart with his bare hands. There's another very famous story about a strong man who wrestles a lion and kills it. And who does that involve? Nope. Not David. He brags about killing a lion with a sling and whatnot, defending the flock, but no. Strong man, killing a lion. No, nothing? Hercules! His very first labor. The Nemean lion, kills it with his bare hands. And then afterward, he wears its pelt as a sign of his strength in conquering the great lion. So, these legends, right, of strong men, this is kind of the great feat of strength, that you can wrestle a lion and kill it with your bare hands. And we have Samson doing that. So he tore it apart. And then it says, he tore it apart with his bare hands as he might have torn a young goat, which is an odd thing to say. The point seems to be, and I think it's right, that it's making a comparison of strength. So the average, this is what the Bible is saying is, the average strong man should be able to tear apart a young goat with his bare hands. And with the amount of effort that would take a typical strong, adult man to tear apart a young goat, that is how difficult it was for Samson to take on this lion. Now, the problem with this is, I could not take on a young goat. And I doubt most young men that I know could take on a young goat. Maybe that's just a decline in culture, a decline in masculinity. I have no idea. But that seems to be the comparison. So the Bible's telling us, okay, so the average man should be able to wrestle and take down a young goat with relative ease. And that is how difficult it would have been for Samson to take on this lion. Again, I would have a lot of trouble with the goat. I think most people I know would have trouble with the goat. It then says, he did not tell his father or mother what he had done. That seems odd. Like why? Why not mention it? But it could be that it just wasn't all that unusual, or it wasn't that interesting. A lion attacked him in the middle of just the middle of the road. He wrestled it, killed it with his bare hands, and it's just another Tuesday. It just doesn't register that he needs to tell his parents about this. He must have lived a fairly exciting or exceptional life, that this just wouldn't be something worth talking to your parents or friends about. Oh yeah, okay, it just happened. And then he just goes on to the woman that he wanted, right? And he went and spoke to the woman because Samson wanted her. So he just goes on about his day like nothing had happened, like it wasn't that big of a deal. And this brings us to perhaps the most, what this really summarizes our frustration with Samson. That he has all this power, he has all this strength, that he can wrestle a lion like it's nothing, tear it apart, and go about his day like nothing happened. And yet, what does he use all this power and strength for? Basically looking to get laid. That's all he cares about. He doesn't care about going and fighting the Philistines. He doesn't care about doing what God wanted him to. He's just doing whatever he wants. So after some time, when he returned to get her, he left the road to see the lion's carcass. I don't know why. I don't know what would be so interesting about the carcass. He's probably not too old, probably maybe around 20, but still, I don't know what has possessed him to think, I'm going to go look at that carcass. But there was a swarm of bees with honey in the carcass. Okay. He scooped some honey into his hand and ate it as he went along. Now, to be fair, honey is highly valuable, highly prized. In the ancient world, it was one of the few natural sweeteners, and to find it was, especially wild honey, was very, very rare and very exceptional. The Egyptians were, as far as we know, they were the first to cultivate honey because it was so valuable and so prized. So to see it in the wild like this, That's pretty impressive. So we think, well, maybe there's some sort of cultural, no, this is nasty. To reach your hand into a rotting lion and pull out honey. No. There is absolutely nothing to excuse this. And there's, of course, the obvious problem. The obvious problem. He's a Nazirite. He's not supposed to be sticking his hand into dead animals. Doesn't matter what's in the dead animal. This is a no. Now, to be fair, he fought the lion, he killed the lion, but the thing attacked him. Like, okay, I think that that's somewhat understandable, but he went back to the dead lion to poke it for whatever reason, and then stuck his hand into the rotting carcass. This is not excusable behavior for Samson. He should not be doing this. But he does whatever he wants, right, because he's a spoiled brat. And he went by to check out the lion just to see it because, I don't know, he's bored, saw the honey and thought, I want the honey. So he returned to his father and mother, and he gave some to them, and they ate it. But he did not tell them that he had scooped the honey from the lion's carcass. No kidding. I would like to say it other ways, but I won't. If your kid brought you something and said, I found it in a dead, rotting animal, I would hope you would be rather disgusted by that, and you would want to throw it away. There's so many problems with this little individual episode. The fact that he brought it home, we're going to get back to that. The fact that he offered it to them and they didn't have the sense to ask him where he found it. Maybe they did. He's like, he just lies. I don't know. In which case, they believed him. And maybe they're that delusional that they think Samson's their little angel. I doubt it. It seems like they're not, I would think they're not that stupid, but we've already known Manoah is not the brightest bulb. But probably the worst thing about this is the fact that he brought it home. It's not just that he's defiled himself by sticking his hand into this rotting carcass of a lion. He has brought the desecrated honey home and offered it to his parents. He is desecrating their home and desecrating his own parents. That is how little he values their culture, how little he values his vows, how little he respects his home, his everything, especially his parents, that he would bring this nasty stuff home and give it to them, knowing it would make them unclean. It's not enough to defile himself. And we could go off on, you raise bad kids and they will be a curse on you and your family. We won't linger on that too much, but this really encapsulates how little he respects their culture and his own people. Despite this entire episode, his father went to visit the woman because Samson still wants her and he is still going to go through with this and help his son marry this Philistine woman, despite the fact that he knows his son shouldn't be marrying a Philistine woman. His dad is not the brightest bulb, I keep saying that. And Samson prepared a feast there, as young men were accustomed to do. So Samson is getting his bachelor party ready. And this probably lets us know what's really going on. So, as we know, Samson is the chosen one. He is the one who's going to be leading Israel. He is dedicated to the Lord. And it's probably not too much of a stretch to think that the word has been spread. The other people know that he is special. They know that he is strong. They know that he is the chosen one. And he probably has people he grew up with his own age who should know that he is a Nazirite. He has the hair. He's not supposed to touch dead bodies. He's not supposed to be drinking. Not supposed to be doing all that bad stuff. But he doesn't want to hang out with them. He doesn't want to share time with them. He doesn't want to party with them. Why? Because they're not going to let him do what he wants. Instead, he wants to hang out with the Philistines because they don't care that he's a Nazirite. They don't care that he's not supposed to be drinking. They don't care that he's supposed to hold himself to this standard. They'll just, whatever he wants to do. And now we can go off on, oh boy, you've got kids who are raised in church, and they've got their church friends, and they got their school friends, and they hang out with their school friends because their school friends will let them do whatever they want. I wouldn't know because I was one of those boring church friends that was always ditched because I didn't want to go and do all the dumb stuff that teenagers did. I was always a party pooper. Not that I have any frustration or animosity towards that. one of my best friends, our parents were very, very close, and we were over having dinner or something. And in the middle of whatever we were doing, there's a doorbell, and the friend, he goes to answer it, and he comes and he goes, "I'm leaving." And we're like, "What are you leaving? Why are you leaving for?" And he goes, I remember what it was. King Kong had just come out, the Peter Jackson version. And he goes, "Oh, I'm going to the theater. I'm going to the movies." And they're like, "Well, you didn't tell us." He goes, "Well, if I told you, you would have said no." And so he's going to leave, and they're like, "Well, why don't you let James go?" And he probably like to see it. And he goes, "Why would I want him to go? I'm going with my friends." And he's out the door. Those were my friends growing up because, yeah, I turned out fine. So, it seems like the commentaries all agree that even though it never actually says in the Samson story that he's drinking alcohol, we can if he's sticking his hand into nasty lion carcasses, he's drinking, come on. And the reason why he's planning this party with the Philistines and not his own Israel buddies is because he wants to drink and probably do other stuff. Again, we don't know what kind of drugs they have access to, but we know they have drugs and that kind of stuff, and he wants to party. He wants to have fun. And he knows if he tries to do it with his Israel buddies, they won't let him. They'll try to stop him. It seems like all the commentaries agree that that's what's going on, that that's why he wants to party with the Philistines. When the Philistines saw him, they brought 30 men to accompany. So this is, we got 30 people. This is a big, lively bachelor party. So they're at this party, they're probably drinking, probably doing other stuff, and Samson decides to have a little fun. And he goes, "Let me tell you a riddle." Samson said to them, "If you can explain it to me during the 7 days of the feast and figure it out, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you can't explain it to me, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes." "Tell us your riddle," they replied. "Let's hear it." I don't know why Samson needs 30 changes of clothes. I don't know why. This is just, I assume he's drunk and he just wants to liven things up, and this is where we head. I actually know one of the editors of the Bible. I really like what the Holman does here. I think it not only is clever, but it kind of gives it gets across the Hebrew in a way that almost no other translation does. And he said to them, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." It's kind of sing-songy, kind of childish, and that's how it is in the Hebrew. Like, it's odd in the Hebrew because it has this kind of sing-songy rhyming, this is not normal Hebrew poetry. So it's like he just kind of made it up on the spot. And again, like, he's probably drunk and he's very immature. He's very spoiled, and I think that the Holman does a really good job translating this. After 3 days, they were unable to explain the riddle. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, this is all during the wedding celebration, so fiancé is probably more accurate because we're going to find out they're not actually living together yet, but whatever. "Persuade your husband, fiancé, to explain the riddle to us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to rob us?" Well, that escalated quickly, right? It's like, your fiancé made a game with us, and if you don't help us win, we're going to kill you and your entire family. So she goes to her fiancé, Samson, and says, "Hey, Samson, these guys are threatening me and my dad. Would you mind taking care of us?" No, of course not. That would be too sensible. No one in this story acts like they have any common sense. So Samson's wife came to him weeping and said, "You hate me and don't love me. You told my people the riddle, but haven't explained it to me." "Look," he said, "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother. Why would I explain it to you?" What we always miss in our Bible stories is domestic squabbles. Like, we just want more of this, right? Young couples just bickering over the stupidest stuff. She wept the whole 7 days of the feast, and at last, on the 7th day, he explained it to her because she had nagged him so much. Then she explained it to her people. So I'm not going to give any commentary. I'm just going to put this verse on the screen and move on. Even the Bible acknowledges that women can nag. So verse 18, on the seventh day, before sunset, the men of the city said to him, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Again, like the Holman does a really, I think, good job with this. So he said to them, if you hadn't plowed with my young cow, you wouldn't know my riddle now. Which, if it comes across as a little vulgar, it does in the Hebrew too. Like, this is, he calls his fiancée a young cow. The plow language is slightly sexual, if not explicitly sexual. The point being, he knows, right, that you've done something to my fiancée. You have accosted her in some way, or you've done something inappropriate, threatened her or whatever, and that's how you got the answer, right? You forced it out of her. And of course, he's not very happy. So the Spirit of the Lord took control of him, and he went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 of their men. So 30 other Philistines, right? It's not the 30 that are threatening his wife and family. It's just some random 30 guys from Ashkelon. He then stripped them of their clothes to those who had explained the riddle, and then gave them to explain the riddle. I just kind of picture him coming with this bundle of clothes soaked in blood and just kind of drops it in front of them and says, here are your garments. Samson is not a good loser. Again, that escalated really quickly. So he lost the bet, and he goes and kills 30 random people to get their clothes so he can pay off the bet that he lost. Keep in mind, this is the hero of the story. This is the guy we're supposed to be rooting for. So there's, in the movie Troy, which I have kind of a love-hate relationship with, there's a scene where Nestor and Agamemnon are talking, and they're talking about Achilles. And Nestor's like, we need Achilles, right? We need the greatest warrior to fight for us. And Agamemnon says, we can't trust him. Like, he'll fight us more than he'll fight the Trojans. And Nestor says, we don't need him to help us. We need to unleash him. Just, throw him in the battlefield and let him just kill whatever he wants. And that's kind of how Samson is. He's just kind of a hand grenade. He just kind of goes off. In a rage, Samson returned to his father's house, and his wife was given to one of the men who had accompanied him. So Samson is just gone. He just disappears. So the father-in-law is like, well, I don't know what happened to him. I guess I'll just let my daughter go off with one of these other guys. It's in the Bible. In chapter 15, later on, during the wheat harvest, so I'm assuming some time has passed. I don't know how long, because we don't know what time is going on in the beginning, but presumably at least a few months. And he's never checked on his fiancée. He hasn't reached out to them. He hasn't talked to his father-in-law. Just one day, a couple months later, Samson took a young goat as a gift to visit his, I think wife now is probably the right word. In his mind, they've gone through the wedding ceremony. It was 30 guys ended up dead over it, and a lot of bad things happened, but in his mind, presumably there was an exchange of bridal price, they've gone through all the festivities, and in his mind, he has a right to her, basically. So he visited his wife. I want to go to my wife in her room, he said, but her father would not let him enter. So I'm just kind of, picturing Samson showing up with this goat on his shoulders, like, me want woman. And that's just what every woman wants, right? Just some random guy to show up at the house with carrying a goat. So romantic. I was sure you hated her. Hate probably means like rejected, you just moved on, too much drama or whatever. Her father said, so I gave her to one of the men who accompanied you. Isn't her younger sister more beautiful than she is? It's like a used car dealer, like, hey, I got a newer model. It's like the reverse version of Laban. I got a younger daughter. You like her? You check her teeth or something? Kick the tires? Why not take her instead? But, it's not about whether or not the younger daughter is prettier or more accomplished or would be a better wife. It's the fact that he wanted the first one. Like, he wanted what he wanted, and no one was going to deprive him of what he wanted. And then he says one of the most incredible statements in these chapters. Samson said to them, this time I won't be responsible when I harm the Philistines. He literally says, I will not be held responsible for my actions. That's the most childish thing you could ever say. I am so mad that whatever I do, I'm not responsible for. That's incredible. What an incredible thing to say. I was guest. I've got friends over in other churches, and so occasionally there's a need for a teacher or something. And so when I'm not here on Sunday mornings, often because I've been asked if I can help out at another church. So there was a church in Dallas, and they asked if I could come and teach for a few Sundays. And I took them through Samson. And it just so happened that we were doing Judges 15, and the pastor decided that he wanted to do kind of he wanted to visit all the Sunday school classes, see what they were doing, what they were learning, and just kind of sit in. So I'm here guest teaching, and here's the pastor sitting on just right in front of me. Like, oh, great, this isn't nerve-wracking at all. And he's a fairly new pastor. He doesn't really know me, but he knows that I come and guest teach every so often because the regular teacher is a friend of mine. So I'm going through Judges 15, and then we get to verse 4, and his eyes are just like discs, and his mouth is hanging open. He actually said that he doesn't remember ever hearing this story before. Like, you're a pastor. Like, you haven't read through the story of Samson before? But anyway. So, verse 4. He, Samson, went out and caught 300 foxes. I don't know how he managed to keep them, how he managed to corral them or whatever. In the Hebrew, the word fox is kind of broad, so you probably have a very specific image in your head of what a fox is, probably thinking of a North American fox. That is most likely not what he caught because, again, he's not living in North America. So in the bottom left, you have the Arabian red fox, a very common fox in the region. In the bottom right, you have the Afghan fox, also known as the Brantford fox, very common fox in the region. The word here can probably refer to any wild, undomesticated canine. So once I say canine, that greatly expands what the word can mean, right? So that could include, for example, jackals. So on the top right, you have the golden jackal, a very, very common. It's very similar to our coyotes. So we have no idea what he's wrangling. And maybe they're not all the same species exactly. I mean, maybe he caught a few foxes, maybe he caught a few jackals, maybe he caught a few coyotes, we don't know. But he's corralled all these wild animals, 300 of them. It's in the Bible, I'm not questioning it. So we went out and caught these 300 foxes, canines. He took torches, turned the foxes tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails. Again, I had this pastor saying right in front of me with his eyes, just his mouth. He's like, how? How did he do this? Like, I have no idea how he did this. So I can't even imagine what Peter would have done to him. Forget the Philistines. If they found out that this is sociopath behavior, right? This is how serial killers start out, tormenting these poor animals. Then he ignited the torches and released the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the piles of grain and the standing grain as well as the vineyards and olive groves. So the retaliation here is the father-in-law. Again, remember why he's mad. The father-in-law, who thought he had vanished for months and decided not to marry his daughter, allowed his daughter to be married off to someone else. And that is justification for him to do this. To catch all these canines, tie torches to them, and set them loose in their fields. I can't even imagine the amount of devastation this would cause. This is crazy. This is insanity. I love the quote from The Dark Knight. Some people just want to watch the world burn. And again, this is our hero, right? This is the good guy of this story. So verse 6. Then the Philistines asked, who did this? As if they didn't know, couldn't figure it out. They were told it was Samson, the Timnite's son-in-law. He never married the poor guy's daughter. The father-in-law is practically innocent in all of this. He has no idea what's going on. Because he had taken Samson's wife and given her to another man. So they realized that the reason why he's mad is he didn't get to marry the daughter. So the Philistines went to her and her father and burned them to death anyway. That poor family. Then Samson told them, because you did this, I swear that I won't rest until I have taken vengeance on you. We're just getting this radical, exponential growth of retaliation. He then tore them limb from limb with a great slaughter, and he went down and stayed in a cave at the rock of Edom. The Philistines went up, camped in Judah, and raided Lehi. So the Philistines are, they're looking for Samson because they want to punish him, right? Because of what he's done. He's destroyed all these fields, caused all kinds of havoc and devastation, and I think at this point we can almost sympathize with the Philistines. Like, they want to know who's causing all these problems. So they go to Lehi and because they're looking for Samson. And they're probably going around terrorizing, killing Israelites, looking for this, crazy Samson. So the men of Judah said, "Why have you attacked us?" They replied, "We have come to arrest Samson and pay him back for what he did to us." And at this point, I think we can fully appreciate what Samson represents. Samson is the cure that's worse than the disease. That's what he is. As much as the Philistines have created problems for Israel, the fact is Samson's just making everything worse. And again, he's like a hand grenade, but when he goes off, that doesn't mean that there's not collateral damage, and that he doesn't seem to care if his actions cause further harm on Israel. He's just an explosion waiting to go off. Then 3,000 men of Judah went to the cave at the rock of Edom, and they asked Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines rule over us, dominate us, or oppressing us? What have you done to us?" So they realize he's not making anything better. He's not leading them against the Philistines. He's not this great hero. He's just destruction. He's just this whirlwind that's just causing all this stuff to happen and making things worse and worse. He then says, "I have done to them what they did to me." What? In what way did you do what they did to you? And in what way is this, fair retaliation? Like, again, I'm not trying to defend the Philistines here, but what exactly have the Philistines done to Samson? Like, okay, you had the issue with the riddle that you started in a drunken rage or whatever, and which then led to you killing 30 innocent Philistines. Then you got mad because your father-in-law didn't think you wanted his daughter anymore, which led to you, again, kind of blowing things out of proportion. It's like all of the bad things are happening mainly because of Samson, right? He's stirring things up. He's making things worse. So in verse 12, they said to him, "We've come to arrest you and hand you over to the Philistines." These are the Judeans. These are the Israelites who are so fed up with Samson that they're prepared to arrest Samson and turn him over to the Philistines because they realize he's causing more harm than good. Like, they're prepared to turn over their own Messiah just to settle things down. Then Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you yourselves won't kill me." You see how much he trusts the Judeans. "No," they said, "we won't kill you, but we will tie you up securely and hand you over to them." So they tied him up with 2 new ropes and led him away from the rock. This is a rather important verse. You want to remember this for next time. They tied him up with 2 new ropes. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came out to meet him, shouting. So we've heard about Lehi. Here's a map. You can see in the far right, we have Jerusalem. And then you can see the yellow and blue. The yellow is Dan, how it curves around Ephraim. And it serves as part of the northern border of Judah. We have Eshtaol, that's roughly where Samson grew up, between Eshtaol and Zorah. We see Timnah to the west on the border between Dan and Philistia. And then Ashkelon, which is where he went to go and kill those 30 innocent men, is down on the coast. It's one of their port cities. But Lehi, we don't know where it is. We haven't found it. It's probably a small, obscure city, and we just don't know. But it seems like the assumption, best guess, is that it's somewhere south of Eshtaol. So somewhere in the Judean territory. It's probably compromised. Maybe the Philistines have taken it over or they've laid claim to it, but it's just south, somewhere in the valley. That's our best guess. I'm sure that a few of you were just on pins and needles wondering, where's Lehi? So in verse 14, the Spirit of the Lord took control of him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like burnt flax, and his bonds fell off his wrists. They just melt, right? Because he's super strong. I don't know, like see the DARE programs or whatever, and they have these chains on these strong men, and they can break out of the chains. These aren't even chains; they're just ropes, and they just fall off them because they can't hold them together. And then in verse 16, he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand, and took it. You're not supposed to be touching dead bodies, and yet he just can't help himself. So he grabs. Now, I guess the response would be, well, what was he supposed to use? His bare hands? I mean, he killed a lion with his bare hands. Why did he need the jawbone? I don't know. He killed 1,000 men with it. I wasn't there. I didn't count them. The Bible says it's 1,000 men. I'm not going to question it. But in verse 16, then Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have piled them in a heap. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have killed 1,000 men. The Hebrew is almost untranslatable. One of the lines, I think it's the second line, it's literally just, it goes something like, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps. And then it's with the jawbone of a donkey, I killed 1,000. So it's just awkward, but I think we get the gist of what he's saying. He's bragging about the fact that he has just killed a lot of people because, again, he's a crazy sociopath. Verse 17, when he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone and named the place Ramah Lehi. And then we get verse 18. I think this is a very important verse. This really helps us understand him on a personal, spiritual level. Okay, because as if we didn't really understand him enough. We do get a lot of information about Samson. On a personal level, we see his family relationship, we see his motivations, as shallow as they are. We get a lot of insight into him. And now we get this verse. He became very thirsty and called out to the Lord. This is, I believe, the first time he's called out to the Lord. And then he says, you have accomplished this great victory through your servant. Well, that's shocking. That's a fairly pious thing to say. To recognize that God gave that to him, that he didn't know, he, as strong as he is, he couldn't have killed 1,000 men on his own, even though he just bragged about it in his little poem. He goes, you did this. Like, this is your victory. Giving God the glory. Like, that's really impressive. Like, maybe he's not irredeemable. There's more to the prayer. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? So close. I think that this really sheds a lot of light into Samson. And I'm going to, again, to compare him to the kid, the preacher's kid who grew up in church. He's got his church friends. He's got his real friends. And he knows what to say. He knows when to say it. He doesn't believe it. He is not sincere. He is going to have another prayer. And it is scary how much the two prayers mirror each other. And we're going to have fun with the next chapter. Another phone. What is it with you people? So, you have accomplished this great victory through your servant, which again introduces us to he knows that this is all about Yahweh. He knows that this all comes from Yahweh. He knows that he is this representative, this chosen hero fighting on Yahweh's behalf. So he knows what to say, just like the obnoxious PK, like the preacher's kid, right? But then he immediately turns it on himself. He goes, must I now die? So he's praying to Yahweh what begins as a very pious prayer. Like, wow, he might actually have a moment of self-reflection. He might actually grow up. He might actually realize that God has given him all this power for a reason. He goes, I'm thirsty. Give me something. Now, I could go into, how many of you use God like a vending machine? I'm not going to do that. But the whole prayer comes down to, I need something. Give me. Because he's a spoiled brat. Because this is how he has been raised. And he is treating God like he probably treats his parents. And he's willing to begin the prayer all pious-like because that's how he's been taught. He's been taken to synagogue. He's been told what to do, what to say, and so forth. But when it comes down to it, it's all about his desires. It's all about what he wants. Again, I'm not going to say, and how many of you treat God this way? I'm not going to do it. You can do it to yourself. That's fine. You can reflect on it and think, don't be like Samson, and do not be like Samson. But we see it, right? We see that this isn't about him praising Yahweh. This isn't about him acknowledging what Yahweh has done. It's all about he's now thirsty, and he wants God to give him something. And he realizes that, in a way, it's almost like he's leveraging something against Yahweh. It's like he knows on some level God needs him, right? He's the chosen one. He's the hero. And he's the one that God is going to use. And so, like, if you want to keep using me, you got to keep me happy. That's not a good way to approach Yahweh. You know, it's not going to work out for you very long. But he's like, I'm thirsty, right? And we could maybe make parallels between this and Esau, right? He's hungry. He's like, oh, I'm hungry, and he's willing to give away his birthright. I'm not going to judge Esau on that. But just this idea of his over-exaggeration, he doesn't come to Yahweh. None of this comes across as him being genuinely humble or him actually asking in a moment of sincerity. It comes across as a spoiled child, just saying, I want something. And again, keep in mind, he's 20 years old. It's not like he's 12 or 11 or whatever. He is 20 years old. And this is how he's praying. So, give me some water. And what does Yahweh do? Does Yahweh chastise him? Does Yahweh say no? No, of course not. Yahweh treats him just like his parents have been treating him, which is to give in, to enable him. We can get into why Yahweh is doing this. Ultimately, it's for purpose, sure, but it's still kind of funny. But in verse 19, so God split a hollow place in the ground at Lehi, and water came out of it. After Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. We see this kind of language a lot, that you drink water and then you're restored. And I'm sure we've all had been those moments where you're really, really thirsty, you kind of feel dried out, you feel like you're dying, and then you drink water and it's like, oh, okay, I'm back. That is why he named it En Hakkore, which is in Lehi to this day. Then we get an incredibly ominous verse. A verse that should almost send a shudder down your spine. He judged Israel 20 years in the days of the Philistines. The impression being that this is one of his first exploits. He's around 20, he's just kind of getting on the scene, he's just starting his antics. This will go on for 20 more years. And I can't help but wonder if it's intentional, the way that it's worded. He judged Israel. Is he judging on behalf of Israel? Is he doing this for them, helping them? Or could it be that Yahweh has picked him to punish Israel for their disobedience? That that it's not just that Yahweh is using him to afflict the Philistines. Obviously, that's going to happen. But could it be that God has kind of sent him as a plague on the Israelites? Like, here's your judge, and have fun with him. Like, this is who he is, this is what he's going to do. We've seen the good judges, we've seen the questionable judges, we've seen the bad judges with Jephthah, and now Samson's in a whole new category, where he's just a pestilence on everything. And that's chapter 15.
Kind of like some of our elected leaders. America's getting what America deserves. You know, maybe Israel got what they were deserving because of their disobedience. But anyway, Brother John, would you close us in prayer tonight?